Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for creating us some time to be here and talk about living in the moment. One of the things that I've struggled with, and I'm still struggling with, is living in the moment because I'm a planner. I love playing chess. Planning is what I do for a living. And when I'm in the moment or trying to be in the moment doing something, I always catch myself thinking about what I'm going to do next week. And sometimes that takes away from my concentration on what I'm doing currently. That's why a conversation like this is very useful. So, in your own opinion, what is living in the moment, and how can someone achieve that?
Well, thank you very much for having me on your platform, Dr. Tolu, and what an honor to be here with you and talking on this subject, and that you and me were talking today in this moment about living in the moment. It's an example of what it takes to live in a moment. Let us have a time of being together and sharing ideas and hopefully learning. And so living in a moment is this concept that I've found to be really very powerful. My book is actually entitled The Day Before Tomorrow, How to Make Today Count. The day before tomorrow is actually today. And the reason why instead of just saying today, I'm writing a book on today. Or living in the moment, I said the day before tomorrow is because, for the most part, if you approach most people and say, when are you going to live the life of your dreams? They are going to say tomorrow. They're going to say someday I'm going to do this. One day I'm going to do that. One day I am going to be wealthy. One day I'm going to really be a good father. One day I'm going to, be a great professional. One day I'm going to really make a lot of money. One day I'm going to be a really good person. So my question became, so what about the day before tomorrow? What are you going to be doing then? Or are you just going to be waiting for that future to come? And so the entire premise of this book is that even the tomorrow that we talk about all the time, or the someday we talk about all the time, it is actually a harvest of today. So if you don't sow seeds today, there is no tomorrow for you. And even to begin with, nobody has ever seen tomorrow. Nobody has ever lived in tomorrow. All of us hope that we would meet a tomorrow, but no one of us has ever lived there. The only day we are given is today, and yesterday is already lived. We can do nothing about it. So let us start to, live the most important day of our lives, and the only day that really counts, which is today. And so living in the moment means that we are not living in yesterday because it's already gone. The chapter is closed. It's not living in tomorrow because it hasn't come. We haven't seen it. In fact, it is an illusion. My book argues that tomorrow is an illusion and that today is the only day that you and me have to live out our lives. I think somebody summed it up in a very wonderful way. He says, yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Today is a gift. That is why we call it the present. So I thought that was very brilliant. Today is a present. So my question is, what are you doing with the present? Are you close-fisted with a present in front of you? So take each day as a present and live it out. So living in the moment is the only by the way, is the only thing we can do. You cannot live in yesterday. You cannot live in tomorrow. You can pretend you are living in tomorrow. You can live in yesterday, but you just have one day. So live the day that you have been given. So, and so and it doesn't. Of course, we're going to be discussing about this, but it doesn't mean that living in the moment doesn't mean that you are not thinking about tomorrow. What that means is simply that you have thought about tomorrow. You have seen the dreams and aspirations and the desires of tomorrow. Then you have backtracked into today and have asked yourself, what seeds can I sow today for the harvest of that tomorrow? And then you are participating in seed sowing today so that you can reap a better tomorrow. I know John Maxwell puts it this way. He says that the only guarantee that tomorrow shall be better than today is that you give yourself the gift of growth today. There's something you need to do today in anticipation for that tomorrow. So that is what I mean when I talk about living in the moment.
Wow. Wow. Excellent. Excellent. Actually, the last statement you made is what I have on my WhatsApp status. The only guarantee that tomorrow is going to be better if we improve today. That's what I have on my WhatsApp status, just to remind myself really that I have to be intentional. And I also like that you mentioned in your book that the best day ever is today. I like that concept, that we're not thinking about something that we've done in the past. People try to hang themselves in the past and they're not able to move forward the way they're supposed to. One of the things that I really liked in your book, you were talking about different experiences, near-death experiences. For example, people who had cancer in the book, and people who were also having cardiac arrest and things like that. These are near-death experiences that reminds us that tomorrow is not promised, right? So I wonder if there are other examples of life occurrences that can actually remind us of the fact that we really have to be present today. It doesn't matter it matters what happened tomorrow, but then we really have to see today as the present that we have. And it's a gift that we have to take seriously. So any other, maybe something that you forgot to put in a book or something that you experienced after you wrote the book that you think can also remind us about the fact that today is really important and life is not promised, really?
One of the things that quickly comes to mind for me is the passing away of my own dad, my biological dad. And if you read the book, you kind of understand. I was born of a single parent. My dad was never around. I met my dad for the first time when I was about 5 years old, the second when I was 6, the third time when I was 8 years old. So I could literally be counting how many times I met my biological father. And and so he was never in my life. But when I was getting married to my wife, at that time I was about 29 years of age. And so I decided that I would bring him back into my life, even though he was really absent, and even though he never showed signs of wanting to have me in his life. But I didn't want my children to grow up and say, Dad, where is your own dad? Like, do you have a dad? Or something like that. Children are very open with them. They don't filter like you and me do.
Yes.
They just say what is on their minds and their hearts. I didn't want my children to really be surprised whether they had a dad, whether they had a grandfather. And so, so I did make that gesture, brought him back in my life. And it was a very difficult relationship because he has never been used to having me interact with him and all of that. But in the process of 20 more, almost 20 more years after that time, I was working out a relationship where I can forgive him as being absent in my life, and being absent in my, not only in my in my childhood life, but even vastly in my adult life. Then I had to take a most difficult decision of coming to a place where I really forgive him for that, and I don't have any resentment towards him. And interestingly, the time that I got now to really strengthen my relationship with him was at a time when he was going through a debilitating illness that finally took away his life in March of 2022. And when he passed away, and then I understood the power of making each day count for me. Because this is what happened. When he passed away, I had the best relationship that a father and a son could ever have. So if you ask me, for instance, that what has been your greatest leadership achievement, I will not point to the 15,000 people that we have trained in the last 6 years. I will not point to the over 55 countries that we have been able to go into and train. I will talk about how I led myself to forgive my dad of the things that he could or could not do in my past, and to be in a place where when he passed away, we had the best relationship I could ever wish for. So what if I did not get to reconnect with him? What kind of regret would I have been going through? Maybe I'll be leaving today and asking myself, what if I just opened my heart up to him a little bit? What kind of relationship would that have come up to? But I don't need to live in that regret. When he died, I was freed, I was glad, I was happy that I could live in the moment, forgive him, have the best relationship I could ever have. And when he passed away, I had only good memories, nothing, no hard feelings, no bitterness, no sense of resentment. I was proud. Probably this is one of the proudest physical moments of my life, to be able to forgive my dad and welcome him in my life. So that to me, it's something that I will always have with me for the rest of my life.
Wow, excellent, excellent. I hope somebody's hearing that and learning from interactions we have with parents and things like that. It's really very surreal that you said that, because I also lost my dad this year unexpectedly. So I know how it feels to lose a loved one, and also now trying to think about the lessons from that and how you can also become a better person, a better father from that. So I can totally relate to that. Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. So one of the things that I also enjoyed reading in your book was living in the moment during the pandemic. The 2020, the year that almost nobody was so sure that we're going to survive. And we were just living one day after the other, hoping that we're going to wake up the following day, and the following day, and the following day. So my question to you is, how were you able to live in the moment during the pandemic, the seriousness of it, when it was really serious? What were your experiences? What were you doing? Or what are the activities that you were still able to perform during the pandemic?
So first of all, let me say that I wrote this book during the pandemic. When the pandemic hit in March of 2020, that is exactly when I decided to write this book. And probably talking about living in the moment and preparing for the pandemic, I think that I cannot give all the credit to myself. I would give the credit to my mentor, our mentor, Mr. John Maxwell, because during that time he held a series of talks, where he really talked about how we can hone in the moment, and that while we're waiting for the pandemic to unfold, we could be doing something with our lives, and we could be adding value to others, and adding value to ourselves. So I decided early in the pandemic that the pandemic will not be about me waiting for the pandemic to go away while doing nothing. I decided earlier on in the pandemic, because of those teachings and because of the information, when the world came to a standstill, I said, then there is this book that I've always wanted to write. So in the pandemic, I would turn the pandemic into a time when I wrote the book. And that's why when you read the book, I try to crystallize that moment, that feeling that we had in the pandemic. They're telling you the countries are shutting down. Nobody is going to work. Nobody is permitted to go outside. And the whole world is like closing in on all of us. Nobody knows what to expect. There is this virus. They say it's like that. They say it's like this. They say it's killing people. No one even knows what this virus is all about. The medical scientists are confused. Leaders of nations are perplexed. and everybody is living in a state of chaos. No one knows. But I learned earlier on in the pandemic that, there is an after pandemic life, and the after pandemic life will happen. So the only thing that the after pandemic would make after pandemic different is that you do something now in the pandemic, that when the pandemic is over, you have something to show for your pandemic. So by the time the pandemic was over, I had a book to show for it, and about the lessons that I learned from the pandemic and for living in the moment in the pandemic and all of that. So during that time, I got involved with writing the book, but outside of writing the book, I got involved with my local church community, and because there was a lot of, uh, you know, like a lot of challenges going on. People didn't have food because they couldn't go to work. Workers that don't have a salary and all of that. So I became involved with Feeding America through my church. And so every now and then, we would go with wearing masks and all of that, serving the people in our local community that needed food and provision and all of that, when we would go and serve. And at the same time, because someone was pouring into my life and helping me get perspective of the pandemic, I turned around too, and I was pouring into the lives of others too. So I was organizing Zoom meetings and talking to people about how they can live with the pandemic and live in the pandemic with the post-pandemic world, at heart, that there is a life after the pandemic, and the life after the pandemic will not suddenly become just explosive just because you waited for the pandemic to go away, but because you did something in the pandemic that will result in a better life when the pandemic is over. So during that time, I run two organizations. One of them is called Lead Missions International. We were preparing for an international suite of conferences in my home country, in Cameroon, in Central Africa. And so because of the pandemic, we postponed it the first time and pushed the dates further. And then the pandemic was not letting up. We pushed the date again further. The pandemic was not letting up. In fact, if anything, the nations were closing and closing down. So in the heart of the pandemic, we had to we had to pivot and do our conference completely online for the very, very first time. But it was in the midst of that moment that we had the highest participation in any of our conferences. We had people sign in from 55 countries of the world. We had over 1,000 leaders come to our conference, and none of that was planned. None of that was envisioned, but it's just how we took opportunity of the moment, knowing that every challenge today comes with an equal opportunity. The question is whether we can see it. The question is whether we can seize it. And when we can see it and seize it, we can maximize that opportunity. And so that is how I spent my pandemic. The pandemic became a very pivotal part of my life. Writing a book, serving in the community, and then being able to add value to others through our organization. Again, leaders from 55 countries, over 1,000 of them. I couldn't have a better pandemic.
Wow, interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. One of the quotes in your book that I really liked is when you said that opportunities are found in the womb of adversity. I think I'm paraphrasing it, but you said that in the book. It's very good. So on my own path, also during the pandemic, one of the things that I did was also belong to a group. We started a group at Florida Atlantic University. We call it Keep Moving. It was a club that helped people to go through the pandemic successfully. We provided masks, and we did a lot of sessions to support students then, because I was still a student. I was wrapping up my PhD during that time. And also another interesting thing that happened during the pandemic was the highest scholarship that I got as a student, as a graduate student, was during the pandemic. I could have just sat there and not apply, but I was like, oh yeah. Despite the fact that I was not sure I was going to be alive tomorrow, the following day, somehow, I still have the strength to apply for scholarship, and I got it, and that was the highest value of scholarship that I got during my graduate program, unexpectedly.
Wow.
One of the things, still talking about pandemic, we both experienced an artificial pandemic, so to say, an artificial pandemic. In that I was a graduate student, and when I came to United States almost 10 years ago, and in your own case, almost 16 years ago, I started a program at my school, and I lost funding, and I was supposed to return back home, and all those kind of rough things happened. But then, reading your book, I also saw that you experienced a similar thing. So I want you to share that experience with us and how it looked like for you.
Well, so I came to the United States, I think, 14th of January 2007, and all I had was $600 to my name. I had a stack of thousands and thousands of dollars in graduate tuition, because I came to the United States for graduate education to do my master's, and I left my wife and our two kids then back in Africa with $100. So our entire thing, and by the way, the $600 was actually borrowed money, because that's a loan that my mom took from the bank, from the credit union actually, and so, in fact, the day before tomorrow is partly inspired by my own story, which is that, while you are still looking to that better future, academic future, better professional future, and all of that, what can you do, or what do you do in the moment? And so I remember standing there at the carousel at the baggage claim at the New Orleans International Airport, because that was my port of entry into the United States. And as we're waiting, carousel is turning and waiting for our bags, my heart is beating inside. I'm like, what have I put myself into? I don't know anybody. It's a strange country. I have a strange accent. People, I look different. Everybody seems to be going about their business. And but I did a small tiny thing, is that I decided that I will not go to my room or where I was supposed to stay. I will go and visit a mentor of mine who had come to the United States earlier than me. So I said to him, please, can I come and spend my first night in your home? And he said yes. So he sent somebody to the airport to pick me up, and so and that person picked me up, came to his home, and I was like, man, I need to speak to you. It was a Saturday, and then he said, okay, we can talk tomorrow. So the next day was a Sunday. We went to church. He took me to a restaurant. And while everything, beautiful place, whatever is happening, but my mind is really fixated on the fact that I had $600 and I didn't know what is going to happen. Monday was the day I was supposed to pay my tuition. And all of that. So my heart was beating. And so on the Sunday, the day before, I sat him down and said, you know what, I've come to this country. I have no money. I thought I would have a scholarship, but, leading up to that time, this thing went through and they said, well, Madison, we are sorry, but we can give you a scholarship next year, but you will need to wait one more year, and then we can put our act together and give you that scholarship. But then my wife and I, we talked. It seemed so clear to us that this was an opportunity and that we could not miss it. We could not postpone it. We could not move it. So we decided to take a leap of faith, and a leap of faith we did. So here am I sitting and explaining to him how I came to the United States. There are thousands and thousands of graduate tuition dollars to be paid, and I have $600 to my name. Not even enough to pay 1 month worth of a room, in New Orleans back at that time. And then he listened to me very well. He was a very great gentleman, and he said words that changed my entire life. He said, Madison, if God brought you here, make no small plans.
Wow.
And that sentence transformed my life. Say, if God brought you here, make no small plans. And I said to myself, yeah, I think God brought me here. I believe God brought me here because I naturally should not be here, given my history, given where I come from. I grew up in a tiny little village in the grasslands of Cameroon. My grandmother, my grandfather, I walked about 6 miles to school each way, sometimes barefooted, sometimes in the cold and all of that. And I said, if for me to live there to here, it definitely must have been God. So I am not going to make small plans. So I decided that I will live a day at a time and do what I can do in the moment and make something of my life. Didn't come from a rich family. Till today, again, I told you that my mom was a single parent. I grew up jumping from home to home because I left my grandfather to my auntie, then to my uncles. So throughout my grade school life, I spent it in different towns, in different villages at different times, depending on who was willing to take me in the home. And so when I look at that, and so that's how living in the moment, doing what I can each step of the way helped me to become the person I am. And then I said, no, I'm going to put that into a book. So I came into New Orleans, and it was in 2007, just 2 years after the worst hurricane that has ever hit the US, probably, which was Katrina. So when I came, homes were still uninhabited. The town has not come back. Probably, I don't know whether it was like 50% of the town was not even back yet. So what I had to do was, help people got homes because I couldn't work, and I was an international student. I was constrained to work only in school and for 20 hours and less. And so I had to go, and we got homes and clean homes that were under the mess for the fortune of $50 a day. That's how much they were willing to pay me. And I was so happy for the $50 a day, not an hour, a day. And that is how I lived moment by moment and worked myself, out of that. And today I'm truly a happy man. I wouldn't subtract any of those days because they taught me who I am, living a day at a time.
Wow. Excellent stories. Thank you for sharing that. Living a day at a time. And one of the lessons that I also learned from your book is the fact that we can find ourselves in unexpected situation. For example, you can find yourself that you were nominated to go to a very good occasion, and you're about to get an award, and you're supposed to get an award. And for example, if for whatever reason you were not given the particular award that you were expecting to get, and you still have to live in the moment, right? You still have to happy. So in your own case, have you ever been in such situation whereby you were expecting a very good result, and there was disappointment that you received? And how do you keep up the energy? How do you keep up the positivity in such moments?
Okay, so just what I described is exactly one exact situation. You remember, I was promised that I will have a scholarship. And then by the time I'm going to the embassy to do my interview, and then I'm told, oh, we are sorry that that thing didn't come through, so we'll have to wait a year. So I had to decide, will I abandon my graduate school education dream because there are no funds? So now you have to now rethink in the moment and like, what am I going to do? How am I going to make my life work? And like I said again, so when I came, I had to begin to do odd jobs, like gutting homes and cleaning homes and doing all sorts of things. Just anything I could find. Um, um, you know, time will fail me to really name all kinds of things that I've been like a security officer, and I'm working now in an abandoned building, guarding it, so that bad guys will not come and make their nest in that building and all of that. Even when our last child was born, our youngest, then was born, I was in an abandoned building, and my wife called me while I was in some dark building somewhere, you know. Until today, I value those moments, because these are the moments, these hard times, and the moments where I learned some of the biggest lessons of my life. You know, how do you stay positive? How do you live a positive life with negative circumstances all around? How do you stay upbeat with a downbeat surrounding? You know, how do you do that? You know, so that's where I learned that in life we can either be thermometers or we can be thermostats. We can decide that we are going to set the temperature of the environment, or we can decide that we are just going to measure whatever the environment says, that is what we are going to be. So there must be something on the inside of you that says that I am valuable. There must be something inside of you that says that I have it in me. You know, all that I need to survive is inside of me, and then all what I need to do is let it come out. You know, let it come out through determination, through believing in yourself, through harnessing and looking for every bit of opportunity that is in the challenge, because every challenge has an opportunity. And by the way, every opportunity also has a challenge.
Wow. Excellent. Go ahead.
You know, I said, so the question is, how are you going to deal with that opportunity in the challenge, or how are you going to deal with that challenge in the opportunity? Your survival, my survival, depends on what we do with the opportunity in the challenge and the challenge in the opportunity.
Wow. This is really good. Thank you so much. You mentioned something that's very important now, hard times. And in your book, you introduced a third concept, the day after tomorrow. The day after tomorrow, you're going to shed more light on that. But it's a very significant story in your book that I really like was when Dr. Miles Monroe met Nelson Mandela, and they shook hand, and the hand of Nelson Mandela was really hard, and Miles Monroe was really surprised and to felt the hand was very hard, and they had to have some conversations about that. What is the significance of that, and how does that relate to the day after tomorrow?
So, by the way, Dr. Miles Monroe was one of my great mentors. I really was a gentleman that really impacted my life in many, many, many ways. And one of the lessons he really, really taught me was to live a full life and to die empty. Live a full life and to die empty. Die empty after having done everything that you could do, after having left, after having, left your contributions on the sands of time. And so in this story, he was talking about, a banquet that he was invited to, a very, very honorable banquet that he was invited to in honor of Nelson Mandela. So as Mr. Mandela stood greeting his guests, he greeted him too. And then when he greeted him, he was full of shock. And, that shock was visible in his face. And Mandela says, "Son, what's the matter?" He says, "No, nothing." He was so embarrassed. He said, "No, nothing." And he said, "No, I know that you are surprised." He said, "No, I'm." Sometimes you are so embarrassed that you don't even know what you are saying yourself. And so he said, "I know that you're surprised." He said, "I know that my hands are very, very hard." And then Nelson said to me, for the 24 years that I was in prison, he says, I had to break stones every day of my life when I was in prison. He said, that is why my hands are so callous. That's why my hands feels like a block of metal. That's why why it feels that way. And then just before Miles Monroe could turn away to go back, he said, "Well, but that's the price for freedom." And so, wow. And so Miles Monroe talks about how he left that moment, and as he was going, to his seat, and as he sat through that entire dinner, he could not forget that statement that he made. He said, "This is the price of this is the price of freedom." And then he said to himself, "May I pay the price for greatness. May I pay the price for greatness." Because that, metal hand, if you will, was a proof that he had paid a price to make South Africa what it is today. And the lesson that we learn from there is that we have to live lives that live a legacy. We have to live lives that mean something, that a life that stands for something. Live a full life, but die empty, empty of everything that was put in you that mankind could benefit from. Let mankind truly benefit from all that is in you. And that is what, living a legacy is all about. So when I talk about the day after tomorrow, I'm talking about the day when you and me are no longer here. Because yesterday, we already know about yesterday. We have already lived it. Today is what we are living. Tomorrow is what will happen in the future. But what about when we are not here? When we are not here is what I call the day after tomorrow. So while living our lives here, this is the way I summarize life. Our best day ever is the day we live with the lessons of yesterday, the hopes and dreams and aspirations of tomorrow, and then we take the necessary action that we have to take today that will make us keep living even when we are no longer living. In other words, we leave a legacy. In other words, people that come generations after, that never met us, that never heard us, that never saw us, are still impacted in the way that they think, in the way that they walk, in the way that they talk because of you and me. Understand, the world is led by dead men. One of the things that most people in the world, including America, prides itself in is that they have a democracy. Well, a democracy is an idea. That's what the philosophers of old did. So these philosophers who thought that, that if people are going to live together, then let the majority rule and let the people decide what laws will rule them, and let the laws rule them according to what the people desire, and let those rules serve the people. That is somebody's idea. That guy is dead and buried. Until today, we are holding it, like we pride ourselves. We are a democracy, we are a republic, we are all of that. But that's somebody's idea. The world is ruled by dead men. Communism is an idea. It still exists till today. Why? It's because it's propagated by the legacies of the lives of the people who went before. My question is, when will somebody coming 100 years after now, what will they be? How would they be impacted by the life I lived? How will somebody coming 1,000 years after now be impacted by the life I lived? Because I know that I'm impacted by the lives of those who went before me, for better or for good. The Martin Luther King Jr.'s of the world, the Mahatma Gandhis, the Mother Teresa's of the world. They left their footprints on the sands of time, and their impact is undeniable. And today, I get up every morning and then I am patterning my life to some of these great figures that have gone before me. The question is, when will stand up somewhere and pattern their lives after mine? When it's the day after tomorrow that I am no longer there, where will somebody says, I learned how to live a better life because of a certain guy called Madison? So that is what I speak about when I talk about the day after tomorrow, when we are no longer existing on the physical earth, when we are gone and no one can see us physically here. What will the impact have been? What will the legacy have been? What will people say about us? Will we just leave messages on our tombstones, or will we really be a true message on the tablets of people's hearts? So that is my challenge.
Wow, wow, excellent, excellent. It's very important that you said that. I mean, another example of people, somebody dead, Kobe Bryant is dead, but people still talk about the Mamba mentality. Right? I think you mentioned that in your book too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important to think about that. Well, we'll gradually run into the end of our session today, but we still have some time to have conversation around the day after tomorrow, today, and yesterday. And one of the things you mentioned in the book that you said is very important is telling our stories. People should be able to come forward. You said the story, the best story that they ever told, the best story that anybody will have the opportunity to say will be their own personal story. And I don't think everybody has embraced this idea, because it takes a lot of being vulnerable, being coming out to share things just like we're sharing now. Some people will keep all this information away and say, well, I don't want to share it because I don't want to be vulnerable to people. So my question, how do you encourage such people that the real thing that change conversation is stories? So you have to be comfortable to come out to tell your story. How do you encourage such people?
Well, Plato put it this way. He said that the world is ruled by those who tell their stories. Well, if you don't want to be a leader, they don't tell your story. And of course, no one will know about you. No one will ever bother you. But if you care about impact, if you care about leaving a legacy, if you care about being someone that people can listen to, then you have to tell your story. So, by the way, talking about telling your story, remember that I actually begin the book by an incident that happened in 2017. I was attending my first International Maxwell Leadership Certification event in Orlando, Florida. And John Maxwell, who is someone that I've admired for a long time, was talking about this book that he had written, and that he had not only written, but he had actually handwritten a note to anyone who would buy that book. And the book was entitled The Greatest Story Ever Told. So, and as I was sitting in that hall, I was like, man, I've not read that one. I've read the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. I've read this one and that one, but this one must be a very, very special one, because he was encouraging everyone to get that book. So I'm sitting in the hall. I have about maybe two tables or so to the platform. And I'm looking to the left, to the right, how you sit in the plane. And when they're giving the final instructions, they say, look at the closest exit near you. And so I was kind of looking, which is the closest exit near me, so that I can run to the book table and get that book, because I figured out there are 2,500 people here. If everyone here wants to get that book, surely I would not have a copy. So I looked for the closest exit, and before he could finish, because he put a full stop on his speech, guess what? I was already at the door. I made it to that table, and I was like, "Where is the greatest story ever told?" And do you have the greatest story ever told? And the attendant said, yes. I mean, he handed me the book, and I took the book in my hand. Then I started flipping over the pages. I flipped. I got some empty pages, and I flipped again, empty pages, and I flipped some more empty pages, and I flipped back empty pages. I said, but maybe this is the workbook of the book, maybe this is not the real book. When I remember, he said he had written a note in the beginning of the book. So I said, well, let me check if that is true and see what other instructions I can have. So I flipped backwards, and sure enough, I saw the note. And here's what the note said. It said, dear friend, the greatest story ever told can only be written by you. And in a little moment, and then he said, fill these 248 pages with acts of goodness and acts of kindness and all of the so on and so forth. And for a little moment, I was really disappointed. I was disappointed because I had rushed out of the place through the door, and I was wondering, I couldn't have rushed out of the doors, come here just to meet with 248 empty pages. Like, what is that? Then I asked myself, well, by the way, he's saying the greatest story ever told can only be written by me. But what is there to be said about me? And in that moment, my life flashed before me. What is there to be said about this village boy from the grasslands of Cameroon? What is there to be said about this guy who, not enough figure, whose father took the next flight out of town, even though there was no airport in my little village. But when my mother was pregnant, what is there to be said about him? What would people, what would the world want to know about this one? The one who showed up at the international airport at New Orleans with $600 to his name. What is there to really be said about him? What's interesting about that kind of a story? And then as I was standing there, then I began to get thoughts. And then why not share about how you weathered your own storms? Tell your story, how you survived your greatest fears, how you pursued your own dreams, how you came to be a man that is pursuing your own dreams and growing and impacting, lives around the world. Why not tell them the story of the things that you have learned, or the lessons that you have learned, and how those lessons are now helping the thousands of people that listen to you, through your programs, through your masterminds, through your conferences, through your seminars. Why not tell them that story? And it was in that moment that I decided that I would buy that book, and I bought it. And the book is with me right now, and I have not written in the book. And so I challenge my listeners that this book was an attempt to fill the 248 pages that Mr. Maxwell left for me to fill. But when after having done that, the greatest story ever told is still untold, because the greatest story ever told can only be written by you, not by me. And so this book is a relay. It says I attempted in a couple 100 pages or tens of pages to just speak to my own experiences, to tell my story. But I challenge you to tell your own story. In fact, the way the book is written, I'm sure you notice it, every chapter has reflection at the back, so that you can reflect on your own story, and then for you to tell your own story. And for this December made this book 1 year old, and that is exactly what has been happening to people around the world. They are being empowered to tell their stories the way it is, their fears, their aspirations, and how they are living each day of their lives, so that they can create an impact and hopefully not only leave footprints on the sands of time, but heartprints on the hearts of men.
Wow. Excellent. Excuse me. One of the things that I want to make sure that we don't forget to talk about is the story in your book that you were talking about. The church wanted to be debt-free. I found that story very interesting. And the pastor had to take a decision, and the rest of the team were not really so supportive of it. But then the outcome was very interesting, and the woman that got involved and things like that. Can you give us that story? That's very interesting.
So this story is set in 2020. So at the end of 2029, this pastor had a great vision that the church was going to be debt-free. They were going to pay off their building and all of their property and become debt-free. But now, of course, in 2020, the pandemic hit. So the pastor was faced with a dilemma. People are losing their jobs. People are sick. The church cannot meet. Nobody knows what is going to happen. And he was left with the decision. Now, do we go on to challenge the church and to tell the church in the heart of a pandemic, in fact, the project was called Freedom 2020, that the church can be debt-free. But it was not just about the church being debt-free, but like we all can be debt-free. Let us as a church experience, freedom from debt. And so, in fact, I was part of the board that was really skeptical about this. And I was like, Pastor, be cautious. This is a very sensitive thing. Talking about people contributing to a project, paying off the debt of the church, where people are losing jobs, where people are sick, and people are doing, when all of this is happening, this is not quite a formula for real, for people to be happy inside a pandemic like we are having. But our pastor stuck to his guns. He really challenged people in a considerate, loving, caring manner. And so, in the heart of a pandemic, for the next a little over a year and under 2 years, not only the church paid off all of its debts and became debt-free, but even members and individuals that were having debt in the church paid off their credit cards, paid off their loans, and also were debt-free. So I said that, and I brought that story in the book to say that, many times that we feel like you are hemmed in, you feel like there is no way to go, you feel like, you are so challenged. There is always an opportunity in every challenge. So at the end of the pandemic, while others were saying we're closing their doors because they could not pay their rents, they could not pay their mortgages, they could not do all of that, the church was looking at another thing. They were celebrating how they paid them in the heart of a pandemic. And in that same pandemic, they were the ones distributing food and supplies and visiting nursing homes and visiting vulnerable people to help them survive the pandemic. So in the midst of a difficulty, that church was reaching out and then trying to pay their debt at the same time. And when they opened themselves up to such level of generosity, wow, what happened was that not only they paid off that debt, people in the church experienced freedom, and yet they were still able to reach the world. And in fact, there was a time that the city was using the church as a place to be able to do some of those pandemic meetings because they opened their doors. So you and me can be an instrument of blessing. You and me, in the midst of hard times, can create something good. And that church was a great example. And that pastor was a great example of a leader who believed in the opportunity in the challenge.
Oh, wow. Excellent story. Very interesting story. I know it's more than that. If you want to hear more about that story or know more about it, just buy his book and you can get the details there.
Well, by the way, the book is available on Amazon, it's available on Nooks, it's available on Audible. So you can actually, if you are an Audible person, right, you want to listen to it, you can listen to it. It's available on all of these different platforms.
Yeah, you can show the book to the viewers once again, if you have it. Yeah.
So that's it. The day before tomorrow, how to make today count. The day before tomorrow, how to make today count. If you want an autographed copy by me, just go to thedaybeforetomorrow.store. So the title of the book, The Day Before Tomorrow.store, and I will sign out an autographed copy and send out to you.
Good. Thank you so much. We're gradually going to the end of the program. This question, I think it's a very important question, and I think I really want to ask it. What is the purpose? How can somebody discover their purpose and find it and live it to the maximum extent?
Okay. Again, I told you I learned about purpose, especially from Dr. Miles Monroe. He says, live a full life, but die empty. How does somebody discover purpose? For me, I think that purpose is something that unveils. It takes time to discover purpose, not something you can say, well, so, it's like, okay, what can I, and get it in 2 seconds and say, well, this is it, and all of that. But the way I talk about it in the book is that you can discover purpose in the following ways. Number one, by looking inside of you, like when you look inside, you say, well, what are my strengths? What are my interests? What are the things that come natural to me? What are the things that create joy in me? What are the things that make me unhappy? What are the things I wish I could, I want to change? Because those things, those happenings, the way you are wired internally, kind of is a pointer to purpose. So look inside. But instead of just not just looking inside, but also you need to learn how to look behind you. Each one of us has a story. Each one of us has a history. Your history is part of your purpose. There's a reason why I was born in a tiny little village in the grasslands of Cameroon. That speaks to my purpose. I can identify with being a village boy. I can understand why somebody has fears of the future when they come in a place where there are many people, because I have been there. I understand what somebody means by when they feel rejected, because I felt rejected, because when I felt like my father abandoned me and left me, I know the fear of rejection, and I understand that. So because I come from that background, I tend to speak and minister and create value to people who have those kind of similar fears. So that is part of my purpose. Because of where I am coming from, I turn that pain into purpose. Okay, so looking behind you is very important. Then look around you. When you look around you, what are people saying about you? Why do your friends like you? What are the things that your friends like about you? That's a pointer. It means there is something you have that they tend to want from you, and that means that's what you are giving. What is the aura that you release? What is that flavor that comes out of you, and why are people coming to you? The law of magnetism says that people follow who people follow people that look like them. So people attract those who look like them. So the people around you are a pointer to what your purpose in life could be. But I also talk about looking above. When you look above, you're asking yourself, what does God think about me? Why did he send me here? Why was I created? Why am I here on earth? It's a question of identity. Identity. Who am I, and why am I here? A question of purpose. So you look up to God, and also you look ahead. Look ahead means, what are my dreams? What are my aspirations? What are the things that excite me when I think about the future? Because if you look within, if you look behind you, you look above you, you look around you, you look ahead of you, you are going to discover, some common threads that go throughout all of that. And that in and of itself could be your purpose. So as you go through life, don't go through life passively. Go through life actively. Find what are the common threads on the inside, behind, in front, above, around. Those common threads point to what your purpose in life can be.
Wow. Can be. So it's a continuous search. You gotta keep searching it. Keep searching.
It's a process of becoming the fullness that you can become. One of the things that I challenge myself, and I was taught this by my mentor, is to die like some of the greatest people on earth died. To die like Jesus and be able to say, it is finished. That purpose is accomplished. I couldn't do any better. I want to die like that. I want to die like the Apostle Paul died. He says, I have fought a good fight. I have finished the course. There's only a crown left for me. I want to die like some of those great men, having accomplished my purpose to the full, and to die empty.
Wow, excellent. Well, we're coming to the end of our session today, and I just want to say, any last thoughts for our viewers today? Anything you want to say before we call it closed?
So, first of all, I want to thank you for having me today.
Welcome,
And
sir.
secondly, what I want you to do is just to encourage every man, every woman, every boy, every girl. You have purpose. There is purpose inside of you. There's a reason why you are here. And unless you rise to the occasion and begin to write that story and begin to tell that story, no one will tell it for you. The world is ruled by those who tell their stories. Your story is important. Your life is important. Your life counts. But your life will not count until you begin to live each day intentionally. So don't just count your days, your birthdays, but let your days count. Because at the end of the day, what we are going to remember is how you made your day count and not just how many days you lived. In fact, to me, it's useless celebrating a birthday and celebrating that you just made it through another 365 days of no purpose, 365 days of nothing you can show for. And so begin to make each one of your days count. And this book was written just to help you and me and remind us of little principles that we can activate each day and make our day count. So that at the end of our day, we can truly say, I fought a good fight. I have kept the faith. I have finished the race. I'm just waiting for what lies ahead before me, a crown. And so for me, that is what a meaningful life is. Leave not just footprints on the sands of time, leave heartprints on the hearts of men.
Wow, wow. That's very motivational, something to think about for the rest of the year and even 2024 as we close the year. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Madison Ngafeeson. It's a pleasure to have you discuss with us and learn from you. Thank you, our viewers, for being here to enjoy the session. I hope you have listened and pick one or two things to learn and become better. And make sure you know that today counts and think about the lessons from yesterday and how you want the day after tomorrow to look like. Your legacy is very important. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Madison Ngafeeson. I really appreciate your time, your knowledge, and your experiences. It was very useful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, bye, viewers. Thank you so much.